The day has finally come, a day I've been scared of for a while. 7 years ago, GitHub was acquired by Microsoft. And for the most part, Microsoft's been a pretty good steward of GitHub, primarily because they've allowed GitHub to operate independently. That just changed. The CEO of GitHub has stepped down, and GitHub is now part of Microsoft in a much more direct way. This is a scary change. I've generally been impressed with Thomas's focus on the community and being part of things. He's the first GitHub CEO that followed me and would hit me up about things. Generally speaking, I've had very positive interactions with Thomas and for the most part with the GitHub team as a whole, which says a lot because I tear GitHub to shreds all of the time. He was one of the reasons that I was hopeful GitHub could turn it around, that they could take the incredible opportunity they have and turn it into something magical and not just a hotbed for the name Copilot and random AI stuff. This change has me very, very scared. I don't know what the future of GitHub is going to look like, but I do want to break down all of the different paths I see going forward, the biases that I've seen from people at Microsoft, and the concerns I have about where this all might end up going. I have a lot to dig into here. I don't got any good joke for the transition, so let's just do a quick word from today's sponsor, and then we'll dive into all the things I'm thinking about the future of GitHub. It's kind of crazy how easy it is to build apps nowadays. When you're using cool AI vibe coding tools, you can whip up the whole app in minutes instead of days. The things that are hardest are no longer writing the code. It's now setting up stuff like auth and payments. That is, unless you use today's sponsor, Clerk. They have both of these things really figured out. The Clerk billing part in particular is so cool. As you guys know, I've wanted this forever. Now, when you set up Clerk, each user can just have subscriptions managed as part of the user object, all routed through Clerk directly. And it's still using Stripe, by the way, so they're not rolling their own crazy thing that's super sketchy. It's just a better interface for getting Stripe right in your apps. You'll never have to deal with webhooks again. For that reason alone, it's worth it. If you guys have seen the hell I've went through setting up Stripe, I have many videos about it. You can just skip all of that by using Clerk. And that's one of the many things they offer. There's a reason so many companies are making the move over to Clerk. It just makes life easier. We still use it for most of the products that we build, and there's a good reason why. It's so easy to set up and get things right. The built-in UI and components is just so handy. The majority of the things I build use this because it's just so much easier than building your own views for things like waitlists, sign-ins, the user button, like the icon in the corner that when you click it has all of the user's information and the ability to switch between different accounts, organization, so you have groups for businesses and whatnot, the billing stuff in particular, having a pricing table built in and all of the management for it in the user's card is just, setting up all of this stuff literally takes days, if not weeks otherwise, or you can go with Clerk and not have to deal with any of that. If you need auth and you need payments, you probably need Clerk. Check them out today at soydev.link/Clerk. Is this the end of GitHub? An important question that we will hopefully be able to answer by the end. Let's start by reading these official posts, both the TechCrunch and Verge, as well as the announcement from Thomas directly. After nearly 4 years as CEO, I'm leaving GitHub to become a startup founder again. With more than 1 billion repos and forks, 150 million plus devs, and Copilot continuing to lead the most thriving market in AI with 20 million users and counting, GitHub has never been stronger than it is today. Most thriving market with 20 million users is a bit bold when ChatGPT is 1 billion, but sure. Here's the official post. This is the important detail about why Thomas left. I know a lot of people are going to be reading into this thinking he's leaving as a sinking ship and whatnot. Does Thomas leaving imply that the future of GitHub is darker than it was before? Absolutely yes. But not in the sense that he's leaving because it's bad, so much as him leaving is bad. But his leaving is for a reason that isn't as malicious or potentially negative as people seem to think. I've seen this sentiment a lot from founders recently. A lot of us started our companies because we love building on the ground floor and making things happen at unbelievable scales. There's never been a better time to make a startup or build a company. I can only imagine how much the strings are tugging on his heart to get back to that if that's the world he came from and he sees what's going on now. It's just, if that's what you want to do, now is a very tempting time to do it. I fully take his word when he says this. I believe this is what he really wants to do. Hopefully he'll accept a check from me because I would love to back Tom. Let's do a quick order of events of things GitHub has done because I think it will help a lot. GitHub started as a way for the Ruby community to share their projects. To this day, a lot of GitHub is still built on Ruby on Rails. Rails represented a huge shift in how people built and how they thought about what they were building. This idea of like a full stack application for the web was a huge positive shift for the industry. I know I'm not the biggest Rails guy, but I will always defend it as changing the way we thought about how we build applications. All the technology I know and love today would have been delayed, if ever coming out, if it wasn't for Rails and the era that it ushered in. And one of the things the Rails community really pushed was the idea of open source tools and technologies. The pieces that you were building with were open source and that you were assembling them together, almost like Linux style. At the same time, Git had become a thing and was starting to get a bit of attention. And Git was intended to take this Git thing, take this Rails thing, smash them together so there's a place for all the Rails code to go. And it just blew up beyond anyone's wildest dreams and expectations. And that's how GitHub started. They have iterated and built a ton of important things since, but the ones I want to focus on are going to be a bit interesting. I know a bunch of you guys are old, but Atom was really important. Atom was an attempt to take what was great about Sublime Text and make it more open and accessible to the greater developer community and ecosystem. If you don't remember Atom because you're young, I get it. Atom was an IDE built with web technologies by GitHub. There was a lot of reasons why. Biggest one by far was that Sublime Text was doing very well, had a thriving ecosystem of extensions, but the editor itself was closed source and paid. And GitHub wanted something that they could more easily build features into, build around, and put on GitHub. It made a lot of sense for GitHub, the developer tool, to have a editor platform as well. And they built Atom to be that. One of those important pieces of Atom wasn't actually Atom itself, it was the tech it was built around. GitHub made Electron because they had web developers primarily at the company and wanted a way to make an editor that worked on all platforms. The combination of GitHub's existing staff and the desire to make something for all platforms led them to trying to wrap Chrome and eventually making what we now know as Electron. Electron was originally part of Atom and has obviously gone significantly further than we ever would have imagined. As I showed on here, Atom's been dead for 3 years now, and Electron is stronger than ever. Electron was a great showcase of how GitHub can build important fundamental technologies, even if they don't tend to do it very often nowadays. But something very interesting happened. Atom showcased how powerful a easy to contribute to platform for your code editor could be. But at the same time, it sucked. Not necessarily because GitHub was really bad, but building a good performant IDE is it's just a hard challenge. And they went in with a bunch of web experience and tried to build an editor and did an okay job. Microsoft, whether or not you like them, are some of the best IDE developers in the world. The standard Visual Studio suite is one of the best IDEs ever made. It's so good that it has basically allowed .NET to coast. It's almost the opposite of iOS, where the Apple platform is so valuable that people feel the need to build for it, so they're stuck with Xcode. Visual Studio is so good, people deal with .NET. The Visual Studio team, and more importantly, the Visual Studio mindshare at Microsoft, saw what was going on with Atom and with Electron, and they decided they would dive in and give it a shot themselves. Microsoft made VS Code largely based on what they saw with Atom. Microsoft's goal with VS Code was to bring their experience, build a great editor, make it as similar to what people liked about Atom as possible without compromising on their goals, and make sure they don't lose this new minimal extensible editor war. Because up until then, editors kind of fell on one of two different sides. There were the super minimal like terminal tools, things like standard Vim. This is even like kind of pre-Neo Vim. So things like Vim, even VI, basic text editors. You had Sublime Text like here because it technically was extensible, but they didn't really want you to extend it much. And then you had stuff like Visual Studio, like JetBrains, Eclipse, all the classics on that side. And more, the space in the middle was getting interesting and getting competitive. And Atom really landed like square in the middle here. And Microsoft realized if the industry moves towards the center of the editor wars, they're kind of screwed because they don't have anything in between here. And they decided, okay, we'll compete. VS Code. And VS Code absolutely slaughtered Atom. It proved that being Electron-based doesn't mean your shit is slow. It proved that you can make a good text editor experience inside of the browser, inside of web technologies. And it proved that there's a huge demand for quality tools with an ecosystem that's extensible. So much so that there are now multiple billion-dollar startups that have built around literally just forking VS Code. So why are we talking so much about VS Code when I'm supposed to be talking about GitHub? Because VS Code killed Atom. And Atom was arguably one of the last big innovations that came out of GitHub. And I honestly believe a big part of why Microsoft acquired GitHub was Electron. Electron was becoming more and more essential to development on Windows. It was becoming more and more essential to their positioning in the developer space. This was also in the Microsoft Hearts Linux era, for those who remember. This is a real picture from a real presentation that the CEO of GitHub gave. They were trying so hard to win back developers. VS Code was proof of that. Microsoft Hearts Linux was part of that. And of course, the GitHub acquisition was a huge part of that. Microsoft really, really wanted to not lose devs because they knew that would destroy their business entirely. And as they were investing more heavily in Azure, as they were investing more heavily in VS Code, GitHub becoming part of Microsoft made a ton of sense. On one hand, it was buying sentiment. On another hand, it was plugging a real gap in their ecosystem. There's a lot of layers to it, but I do think this made a lot of sense. To this day, I'll still defend this acquisition. I know there's a lot of people who are just scared and upset whenever big company buys small company. I don't know if any other big company would have been a better steward of GitHub than Microsoft, especially when you consider other things going on around the same time, like TypeScript. Microsoft was trying really hard to be a meaningful player in this new world, this new ecosystem. And I do honestly think they ran GitHub pretty well, especially at the start, because they weren't really running GitHub. They were funding GitHub. They owned GitHub. But as was very clearly stated in a lot of these other things, GitHub was run independently up until this point. And this is where things start to get interesting, because previously GitHub was an independent business within Microsoft, but they ran themselves separately. They collaborated a lot. Now, GitHub and its leadership team will continue its mission as part of Microsoft's CoreAI organization. That's a big shift. What happened there? Well, GitHub did have one last big innovation. This one came from the office of the CTO at GitHub. Copilot. Copilot was one of the first tools to take advantage of the power of the new GPT models, refine and fine-tune one to be better at code, and then build it into VS Code. Copilot blew me away at the time. You can check my old videos of when I used it to compete in Advent of Code and got a leaderboard position because it auto-completed 2 functions for me. Copilot changed our understanding of how AI tools can benefit us as developers. It was a huge stepping stone, not necessarily in quality or anything like that, but in showing us what the UX of these things could look like. And it really kickstarted this modern AI race in ways we never would have thought. It also became a brand name that was really powerful. There's a thing that Microsoft does quite a bit, which is when a product does well or a brand does well in one of their sub-organizations, they pull it in. Someone actually brought up the other time this happened in chat. Cortana. Cortana was I don't even know what you'd call her in Halo. She was like the assistant virtual intelligence character that a lot of the game is built around. Very positive sentiment about her in the video game community. And since obviously Microsoft owns the Halo IP, since Microsoft really wanted positive branding, with the Windows 10 launch, they introduced Cortana as part of Windows as like a voice assistant for doing things on your computer. And it bombed hard. But that was just another example of Microsoft taking a brand that went well for something inside of another Microsoft business and then pulling it over to Microsoft Core. And as you've all probably seen by now, they have done the same with Copilot. Let's see what comes up first if we Google search Copilot. Oh, look at that. Microsoft Copilot, your AI companion, Copilot Chat, Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat, Microsoft 365 Copilot Overview, your AI companion, Microsoft Edge. And then after we see GitHub Copilot. This is what Microsoft does. When a thing does well, the product leads, managers, execs, and everyone else at Microsoft's like, oh, that seems to be resonating. How many sticks do we have to beat this horse? They don't even check it for a pulse. They just see a horse they didn't see, and they're like, oh, let's go. And that's how we end up here. And now whenever I boot my stream computer that I record all my videos on, I get a new novel error screen as Copilot tries and fails to launch. Yeah, not great. That said, I have felt relatively isolated from that mess beyond it fucking up my stream computer. Because, and this is another potentially really hot take, I really, really like the VS Code team. I have had awesome interactions with those guys forever now. There's a lot of overlap between the VS Code team and the TypeScript team. And before I had any platform at all, Daniel Rosenwasser was open to DMs on Twitter. I hit him up about some performance issues we were having with giant TypeScript projects at Twitch. Not performance on the user side, but performance in our editors, our build tools, and whatnot. And Daniel was super receptive to me as like a mid-level engineer just reaching out with 15 followers on Twitter asking for some help. And he was awesome to work with. We ended up booking a call between the TypeScript team and like 3 different teams at Twitch to try and improve our performance, get really into project references, all these types of things. They're awesome to work with. And to this day, I still chat with Daniel Rosenwasser and a bunch of the other guys over at Microsoft regularly. Just one small example of how much this team cares and why I like them. This one's from literally last night. I posted about how GPT-5 wasn't performing as well in Cursor as it did when I was first using it. Burke from the VS Code team replied, asking if I could replicate the weird behaviors I was seeing in code. So I tried. I said, I'll give this a shot, 1 sec. I did, and the results weren't good. It leaked the gradient and just wasn't the model I was used to. It just wasn't performing as well. He replies, I love this reply. It's a small thing, but if you're a brand or a person that's trying to like win over people like me on Twitter, you can learn a lot from Burke because he's chill. That's the biggest thing here. Okay, now, and just humor me here, using insiders, add these 2 settings and run it again. So I did, because this was a very kind ask, and and just humor me here. Good. I tried it, got stuck in the searching text for like 5 minutes, but the fact that we had this like real back and forth publicly, because he could have DM'd me to try and hide it. He could have done a lot of other different things. But the fact that like the Microsoft VS Code team is willing to have the conversation publicly that can make them look bad, that they're willing to roll the risk because they care more about learning the information and it being public than they care about being grilled. It's a really positive sign. And I've had such great interactions with these guys. I'm actually going to be, or I don't even know if this is public yet or not. I don't think I signed anything for it, but I'll be hanging with them in September. I'll say that much. And remember, I'm an investor in one of their biggest competitors. I'm an investor in Cursor. I am also an investor in Microsoft. I have a lot of money there in my like general savings and portfolio, but I'm invested in a competitor and they don't treat me any differently. They have been genuinely great to work with. The VS Code team's awesome. The TypeScript team's awesome. Rosenwasser, Burke, all those guys have been great to work with. They care a lot. And here is where the takes start to get spicier. The VS Code and Copilot teams care more than GitHub Core does. I don't know how else to put it. I just don't see this level of care, thought, grind, or innovation on the GitHub platform. GitHub has the opportunity to just absolutely destroy this shift into a new era of software dev. They could be the key to push things forward. They have so much opportunity, and they're taking none of it. And I see some skepticism in chat, like, this is because Microsoft wanted to make it paid. I would argue the opposite. One of the first things Microsoft did when they acquired GitHub was make it so you could have private repos for free. I no longer need to be on the pro tier, which was huge. Microsoft wanted the sentiment more than anything from GitHub, but they don't know how to maintain it. I don't think GitHub understands developers well enough to make GitHub the platform something that devs continue to love and find more value in over time. I think it's become such an essential piece of the developer world that it's been allowed to coast for a long time. There's a concept I've had for a bit that I don't really know how to put into words. I've been thinking about this a lot, definitely not because of a specific drama that happened recently, but the idea of what I call, for now, borrowed sentiment is what I'll say. Or should I say legacy sentiment? I like that more, legacy sentiment. This concept that I've been trying to put into words is a thing that happens when you are so far ahead at a point and so much more positive, so much more understanding of the community that you have well-earned positive sentiment and then you get to keep it for way longer than you might otherwise be reasonably expected to. My favorite example of this by far is Firefox. Firefox, in a lot of ways, saved the web, and Firefox in its current state is a bit of a disaster. But people still love it and plug it and defend the shit out of it, even though it's a disaster, because they know how good it was and what it represented at the time, and in their head, it still represents that. And I get it. I understand why they would feel that way. I felt that way too. But now there are better browsers that are also open source that might not have the same mindset as Firefox does, but fucking Mozilla doesn't either. We've seen that in enough drama at this point. Another example I think about far too much is VLC. Pre-VLC, if you wanted to play a video, you'd have to install all the right codecs, one of many different players, hope they play nicely together, and maybe the video will play. VLC was great because it kind of baked everything into one application, one exe you could download, and it would play everything. That's not really the case anymore. VLC is slowly fallen apart. Oh boy. Hopefully me saying this isn't going to get a bunch of annoying comments from people that I don't have beef with, as it may have somewhat recently. But yeah, you get the idea. And I would argue GitHub is another one of these cases. The reason I bring this up is there's a lot of people who will stand behind a thing that might not be serving them properly anymore, simply because it did so well in the past, and they don't have enough of a reason to leave. And I think that's the case with all of these. GitHub isn't good, but it's good enough. VLC isn't good, but it plays most of your pirated videos fine. Firefox might not know how to render a gradient, but it can render your inbox fine, so you don't really care that much. These things are able to coast because they have the sentiment from the past, and the pain points aren't big enough for people to move. And GitHub in particular has a big edge in that it is universal. It is where you expect code to be. If it's not on GitHub, it's reasonable to assume it's not open source. It's kind of crazy when you think about it, but that's reality. Because of that, Microsoft has been able to coast. GitHub has not had to innovate in meaningful ways. They have flubbed around, made mistakes, and fixed them for the most part, but they haven't really added anything that I use regularly. I cannot remember the last time GitHub introduced a feature that has become part of my workflow on GitHub. Maybe Actions, but even then, there's other companies. Two of my sponsors who have also invested in are Depot and Blacksmith. These guys are building alternative infra for GitHub Actions. That is half the price and significantly faster. It's hard for me to recommend anybody use GitHub Actions through GitHub when you could use them through Blacksmith with one line of code change, and same with Depot, especially if you're building Docker images with Depot. They will make your Docker builds absurdly fast. Both are great companies, and they are taking out one of the edges that GitHub has. And then there's Graphite. I've referred to Graphite as imagine if GitHub didn't give up and kept innovating. Imagine if GitHub cared. These guys built a significantly better experience on top of GitHub, still uses GitHub repos, still uses GitHub behind the scenes, but they built a better code review platform. They took PR seriously. They took the way that we stack our work up, the way we request reviews, even just having a priority view like this that is useful and works, an actual inbox instead of the shit show that is notifications on GitHub, actual hotkeys for sneaking around things to open and close sidebars. It's so much better. And it just makes you think, imagine if GitHub cared enough to do that. But they don't. They'll occasionally Hail Mary a random side project. Copilot wasn't meant to be a big thing. It was an Office of the CTO side project on a different blog from their main blog. It just went way better than anyone expected and has now not just become GitHub's core brand. It's now a core product and branding for all of Microsoft. And I think that's what's going on here. The biggest thing GitHub has provided to Microsoft in the last 5 years has been Copilot. That is how Microsoft now sees GitHub, is through the lens of Copilot. Things like VS Code and TypeScript aren't really GitHub teams. For my understanding, the majority of the people working on both of those came from Microsoft, not from GitHub. GitHub's value is hosting everyone's code, developers liking it, and the Copilot and AI branding. And Microsoft is choosing to triple down on that, which is kind of scary because their attempts have not been very good. I tried the GitHub vibe coder, Spark. It did not perform particularly well. I was very disappointed with Spark. It was probably the worst vibe coding tool I've used other than maybe the Firebase one. They're pretty bad in their own unique ways. Cannot recommend using it. It's just not there. That seems to be the direction they want to focus on because their attempts to invest on the developer side on GitHub have not went very well. And they did have a thing go well once with the AI side. So it seems like that's what they want to do. And that's why the call out here happened. GitHub will be part of the Microsoft CoreAI organization. On one hand, this is good because, as you can all guess, the CoreAI organization at Microsoft has a shitload of funding. But on the other side, it's scary because now GitHub's incentives, GitHub's role and goal at Microsoft, the thing that the GitHub team reports on, the thing that their metrics are, the measurements, that everything that matters to GitHub, their KPIs, are all now being reported to a team named CoreAI. So if you're working on things at GitHub that aren't directly AI related, you're no longer really contributing to the mission of the organization you're part of. And that's kind of scary. The CoreAI team's a new team led by former Meta executive Jay Parikh. Includes Microsoft Platforms and Tools division, as well as the DevDiv team, focused on building an AI platform and tools for both Microsoft and its customers. This also means there's no longer a single leader or CEO of GitHub. That is a huge thing. GitHub is now a team at CoreAI. There's no CEO of GitHub. There's no exec running GitHub. They're a team that's part of this other thing. And this team's going to be very focused on building AI developer tools. One thing I really do want to emphasize here is that a large part of why GitHub was acquired was the positive sentiment with developers. Microsoft doesn't want to lose that. They aren't investing in gaining more of it with GitHub. That much is pretty clear, but they are scared of losing it. So I can't imagine them doing something stupid like making all of GitHub paid or putting more things behind paywalls. They are generally very generous with GitHub because a huge part of why they acquired it was to make developers like them. It's almost like a marketing expense more than anything. So if your concern is that they're going to lock down GitHub and make it more expensive or stuff like that, I wouldn't worry about that. I hope I don't have to eat my words on this, but I really want to emphasize that the nature of how Microsoft thinks about GitHub is one where they're more likely to decrease the price than increase the price because both of those things are cheaper than trying to build new features, which is what they seem to be really scared of. I'm not really sure what this ends up meaning for GitHub long term. My gut feel is not good, though. I've already felt like GitHub is slowly rotting. It just kind of sucks to use. Like, if you think GitHub is fine, you haven't reviewed a big PR on it anytime recently because it's rough. It has not been a good experience for a while. It's fallen so far behind, I don't know if it can catch up, and I don't think they're trying either. I think they're trying to go a different direction. On the bright side, if you work at or invested in one of the competitors like Blacksmith, Depot, Graphite, GitLab, anything other than Bitbucket, you're in a pretty good spot right now. But yeah, this is scary. I'm concerned. And this isn't even touched on my hottest take, and I will not be going into this any further. Maybe another video, let me know in the comments if it should be. I don't think Git's the right primitive for AI source control. Git is really good for humans to collaborate. Git is not a good experience for AI agents to. And it feels like we've been trying to force AI agents into Git instead of the other way around. What if we tried to rethink how we do source control around the fact that every commit could have multiple different things working on it? What if we had a way to handle merge conflicts that didn't involve throwing everything at the wall and praying? GitHub isn't well positioned for the AI future because Git isn't well positioned for the AI future. And since GitHub is built entirely around Git, they are not at any more of an advantage as anyone else. It's kind of my smartphone analogy I always give. Imagine back in the day, you realized smartphones are obviously the future. These devices are getting more and more powerful every day. 3G and now 4G are making it so you can connect anywhere in the world. It's obvious that mobile is the future. So you're betting on that. You know mobile's the future. You're going to be first. You're going to be ready to go. So you go all in on building Java applets for the Kyocera Echo and the BlackBerry. How much better off are you than somebody who got into iOS development 2 years after the App Store? I would argue you're worse off. This is the problem. GitHub being so far ahead on source control means that it might not be well positioned for a new era of how source code is built and written. I think that's all I have to say. I'm not telling you guys to move off GitHub right now, but I would make sure you have your repos in a few other places just in case, especially if you care a lot about them. And it seems like a good opportunity to really put the pedal to the metal and get GitHub a bit scared because I don't think they have it in them to keep up anymore. VS Code will keep up. TypeScript will keep up and possibly even excel. Copilot could very well continue growing and doing well, but I don't think GitHub is well positioned right now. Let me know what you guys think about this take. Am I way off base or am I pretty on point? Until next time, peace nerds.